Welcome to the Heart and Science of Creative Leadership. This is Aarti Shah, and I'm here with my co-host, Bill Coletti, and we are doing what we always do, which is talking to entrepreneurs of creative agencies about their milestones, methods, and mistakes on their entrepreneurial journeys. How are you doing today, Bill?
I'm doing great, Aarti. These are just continue to be a handful of themes showing up in all these conversations, but they just continue to we find a new thing, an interesting thing in just about each conversation.
I think that's a great point. We have some big, broad themes, but there's unique perspectives that we're getting in every conversation. And I think our listeners are in for a treat today because we have someone who has an unconventional journey to becoming an agency owner. But before we introduce our guest, Bill,
yes,
what's your heartbeat for the week?
Yeah, so my heartbeat for the week is it's been a big week about AI. What can AI be? And I signed up for a newsletter, and like with not every newsletter, but with a lot of newsletters, they're like, well, go check this out, or go check this out, or go highlight this thing. And so I've kind of been looking and investing in different tools just to see what's different and not's different. And so my heartbeat is around, what's this going to mean? What's it going to be? What's it going to do? And I've been asking it, honestly, the big things I've been doing is I've been asking it to ask me coaching questions about my journey and my business. And so it's been very heart-filled, and then took it into my daughter's getting her master's in counseling. And we together took it I'm a coach, but she took it to a therapist context. And so I was very interested in how it actually got to the heart of my journey, which I thought was neat.
I think that's really insightful, and it makes me think about our conversation with Michael Young. And one of the things that Michael said was he wants AI to be able to think like him one day. And I think by asking AI to ask you questions, I think is a step towards doing that.
Yeah. And the one just a little shout out of, and maybe this now is my science experiment as well. It's a little bit of both. Is there is an app called Pi, and it's a chat bot, but it's truly a chat bot. You talk to it and it talks back to you. So it's an app on your phone, and you go, hey, I'm thinking about whether I should travel to Barcelona for the summer. What do you think? Well, Barcelona is a great place, and you might want to think about these 5 things, but don't forget about Rome as well. And so it's this AI-enabled partner, and to have conversations with, and real native conversations, not prompt based. And so that's my science. That's my science experiment, is chatting with Pi.
I talked. There were some friends that I have who last summer were using AI, not quite the same thing, not the native conversations, but they were using AI to plan summer vacations and going to specific cities and saying, and being really specific. Like, I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. We like to do these things, make us an itinerary for 3 days or something like that.
Yeah. And what about you?
So my heartbeats are, so Bill, you went futuristic and I went a little retro. We've been rewatching movies from the late 80s and early 90s and even earlier. And what stands out to me are the runtimes, right? So it is rare for any of these movies to be over 100 minutes. I mean, 120, it's like, whew, it's a long one. And these aren't just popcorn fare. Like, these are some of the most respected films of their time.
Like what? Give me a title. Give me a title.
Okay, so one I will give you is Sex, Lies, and Videotape, which I never saw because I was too young for it when it came out, but it's actually been credited for sort of launching the indie movie revolution. It's Steven Soderbergh. He was 26 when he did this piece, and it's a masterpiece. It holds up. It's about how videotapes, which I think you can now replace with social media, how they can be both confessional and then kind of voyeuristic and then kind of weaponized as well. No matter what movie that we are looking at from that era, the runtimes are fairly contained. And in this era of 2-hour album drops, 3.5-hour movies. I just want to remind everybody the art of editing and being concise in your storytelling, and why, consuming your content should not feel like a slog on the part of the audience.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that all of us as storytellers and creative leaders can benefit from remembering.
Yes, brevity is best often.
Yes.
So hunker down for an hour-long podcast.
Yes. Well, I mean, to be fair, we do keep our guests at 1 hour. We don't let them go into the 90-minute realm. And then my experiment is, this is not so much an experiment that I've been doing, but I've been watching this now play out, right? So we talk a lot about culture on this podcast. I'm sure you probably saw the CEO of Spotify recently said on their earnings call that he was shocked by the impact that the layoffs have had on productivity and morale. And we've had discussions of, we've had CEOs on here talking about how they've never laid somebody off. And this, while there's obviously a place for that, right? I mean, there are certain times that it's going to be absolutely necessary. We saw this at the beginning of 2022, or it was actually 2023, right? When we had seen some companies that had been hoarding talent, that were hiring people without any sort of specific job function, just because they had all of this, money to spend to do that. But it's a great reminder that, short term, you can hire who you can make cuts to sort of make your quarterly numbers. But ultimately, long-term business success really rides on sort of being intentional about these decisions and thinking them all the way through. I do think that we'll see the agencies that survive and thrive are the ones that, were able to deliver on commitments they made to their staff and to their values.
Yes.
So I thought that was, I know that it was brave for the CEO to come out and say that, but I think if you look at the research, there was a lot of like, well, of course, because research bears that out, that layoffs actually are bad for long-term performance for a company.
Yeah, absolutely. So what was the word that he used? Shocked? Appalled?
I think he said he was shocked by the impact of the
Shocked.
layoffs. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's funny. I saw the headline and I didn't go as deep as you did on it. And I was like, well, damn, that's naive. Well, you don't think that's going to be shocking? That people are going to feel negatively about that? And obviously, if you go a little bit deeper, and again, kudos for bringing it up. But just if you read the 6 words of the headline, CEO shocked, you would be like, duh, you're firing people.
Right.
And call it whatever the hell you want to call it. You're firing them.
I mean, culture does matter, right? And I think it's just another proof point towards that. And which kind of is a good segue to introduce our guest today. So today's guest is someone I've known for a very long time in our industry, Vijay Chattha, who describes himself as equal parts artist and entrepreneur. He founded VSC in 2002, pretty much fresh out of college. And that makes him perhaps the first entrepreneur on our show who started an agency without doing a tour of duty at either a big firm or on the corporate side. And actually, I'll just ask Vijay himself, that's correct, right?
That's right. I came in from being a failed startup entrepreneur, and I fell into it by enjoying the process of trying to figure out how to get our story out there as an entrepreneur, and then cracking some codes of it all, and then helping my other friends that were starting new companies who still didn't understand how it all worked, and just being helpful to them. And one of them encouraged me to start a PR firm, and then the rest is history.
So this startup that you're talking about, this was right out of college. So
I had never had a full-time job out of college. So started this company. So basically what happened was junior year, I was lucky enough to get an internship in Europe. I was studying abroad, worked at Sony Music. One of my best friends had an internship at Microsoft in Seattle. We both came back to college senior year. He said, "Hey, how was your internship?" I said, "Oh, entertainment's really cool. I hated working at a record label. It's just terrible. Like, I like music. I hate the music industry." And he came back and said, I like technology a lot. Startups are going to be big, but I actually like entertainment. So we started the first city guide for Philadelphia online, which was helping the 250,000 college students find out what to do in Philadelphia. So dynamic listings for nightlife, art galleries, restaurants, and things like that. The only thing that existed then were these papers you could get at kiosks, like the newspaper stands, like the Philadelphia City Paper type things. But there wasn't anything designed for college kids or allowed for user generated uploads of events. So we started it there. We raised a little money. We expanded it to 14 cities. And then the .com bust hit us. And we weren't able to make enough money. Online advertising wasn't there yet. And so we basically had to sell it uh, at like a major discount. So we had an exit, but it wasn't a great outcome. But, we call it like it was like an MBA on the streets. So I'm very grateful for that. Learned a lot. I learned a lot about what I didn't want to do. Um, and we had some fun. We met some great people along the way. We actually, Elon Musk came to our school, and he had just sold a company that had event technology to the Gannett, who owns USA Today. So we bugged him after his talk. He reluctantly signed up as an advisor and helped us make connections in the Valley. He was very busy with his new company, and many other folks that we kind of stumbled across in that path have been very helpful on our journey and still are today. Many have gone on to their own careers. Many of our employees at the time have all built interesting worlds out there. So
And Bill, you may have the same question. Like, so then you said a friend of yours suggested you get into PR. Can you tell us a little bit about how that sort of came about? And what did you know about PR going into this?
it's very random. So when we had a startup, our first advisor had suggested we hire a PR firm in New York. So it was George Simpson. He was one of the top New York Silicon Alley comms consultants. So he helped us. And I was always curious, like, is PR like doing taxes? Like, if you screw up, you're going to get canceled. You need to work with a professional. Like, is there codes you have to use? And then I would see the email thread from George, and I'm like, the guy's just emailing people. I can email people. Um, yeah, and George is great, by the way. I mean, and no disrespect to George. So after our company went under, or we sold it, I took time off. At the same time, I took time off. My parents and other people in the Sikh community, which is the Sikhs of India, we're a religion and culture there. They were coming together to build a exhibit at the Smithsonian. And I volunteered to join there and help. I actually got a part-time job at the Smithsonian, helping with a big fundraiser and trying to attract more donors to get Sikh art from India in the Smithsonian. And it was actually pretty cool. It's like totally different than running a startup. Similar skills though, right? You had to promote, you had to fundraise. And in that process, I was like, man, we need publicity for this thing. So my boss at the time there, Dr. Paul Taylor, was like, well, why don't you just figure it out? Like, why don't you reach out to some contacts? So that was the first time I started reading publications and saying, wow, maybe I should email them about this exhibit. And it actually got a lot of attention. So we were on the cover of the Washington Post. We got in Reuters, all these places. And then my former co-founder, Nahal, was like, man, who got all that press for that thing? That was amazing. I was like, actually, I did it. He's like, oh man, I need that for my startup. Would you help me with my PR now? And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, Smithsonian's obviously more newsworthy than like whatever you're doing. And he's like, well, we're selling SMS mobile marketing technology to Madonna. I was like, okay, maybe that would be cool. And the thing I love about Nahal is uh, most traditional companies would be very nervous about getting approvals from all their customers. We all know this in PR. You can't just put out PR. Nahal is different. So he's like, hey, here it is. We have the deal. You should talk about it. And often we would publicize things where the customer they're being quiet and they didn't even want to talk about it. So he got a couple cease and desists, but it actually exploded. And so what happened, that was 2002, 2001 bust. A lot of the PR firms also went under, the tech PR firms at the time. You may remember this, Bill. A lot of people had left SF. A lot of the bankers, some of the iBanks had shut down. And journalists felt burnt. They felt like they were sold a bag of goods for all these eyeball companies and stuff, meaning like they were valued on eyeballs and not revenue. And so we came in with a fresh perspective and we started one thing I negotiated, I said, hey man, like what's my, can I get paid? He's like, we don't have much money. I can pay you like $2,000, give you some stock. And I'm like, cool. I mean, that's barely enough to live on. He's like, well, let's do this. Every time you get me press, when I send out an email blast, I'll put at the bottom public relations by VSC. I was like, that's a good deal. Okay. So Nahal, every time we got him a great article, he'd send it out to anyone we met in the wireless industry. And then the business just flourished. We just kept getting more companies. And it was like a new era, almost like a whole new group of founders from the last group. And a lot of them were coming from the wireless industry, AT&T, Verizon. They're trying to build businesses. So that's kind of how I started. And I moved to San Francisco. I worked at home like I do now, I guess, just in a smaller home. And went, just grew the business, started hiring people off Craigslist back then. I remember hiring people that were in PR. The bust happened. They started selling real estate in San Francisco. Then they came back to PR. They probably went back to real estate at some point, but it was so barren then, honestly. And when we emailed the journalist about something, they were very rude. They said, never send me this shit unless you give me the revenue on these businesses. So that was how it started.
That's great. That's great. So obviously right out of school, you went on the entrepreneurial journey and went there. So talk about that seed. Was that seed there from the very beginning to be an entrepreneur? I mean, did your family instill that? Where'd that seed come from?
Yeah, it's a good question. When I look back, I always had this vision of working at some cool corporation. Maybe it was consulting, maybe it was international relations, whatever that meant, work at the UN, maybe a big media company. I was getting excited about like, what would it be like to work at a record label or things like that? And so I never thought about entrepreneurship. It wasn't a thing encouraged.
Was it in your family? Was it in your family at all?
Well, when you look back, so my parents were physicians who started a practice, but they came from India and they basically run their own small business, right? They didn't work for a corporation. They didn't have any like traditional business skills, like they didn't know marketing and enterprise sales, but they did have to balance their budget. They had to hire people. And so they ran a small business. My co-founder, Nahal's family did have a business. They were selling incense. They were import-export industry. And those are like some of the early Indian American entrepreneurs or Indian import-export. So he was more comfortable with this idea than I was. My thought was worst case scenario. Like, first of all, like at that stage, you could be a CEO with zero experience, right? Like you're not going to get that in the corporate world. In the worst case scenario, I could fail, we lose some money, and I go get an MBA. That was really the plan. So we actually did fail, and I did apply to get an MBA. And in the process of applying is when I started doing this consulting work with him, and it started growing. And it basically, I started to analyze. I'm like, should I just keep doing this thing? It sounds like it's growing, versus restart again. And I just decided to keep going with it. So I always thought of entrepreneurship really as more of like a trial back then than a calling. And I just was like, maybe this internet thing is a flash in the pan. Let me go like enjoy that for a minute, and maybe I'll learn things that I can apply. And it was true. Like you learn things when you do things versus just read about them. Yeah. So that was how it started.
What was the turning point at which you realized that this was a viable business that you were going to invest, whether that's real estate or headcount in, and it transitioned from being this thing that you were doing on your own in your house with your partner, and now suddenly now you were looking at headcount, you were looking at bringing on
when did
people.
It stop being a trial?
Yes, exactly.
That's a really good question. I mean, it still always feels so vulnerable, honestly. It still always feels like it can fall apart tomorrow. And it's kind of weird. Like we had the pandemic, now we have this like zero interest rate being gone, which has hit a lot of tech comms. So I never feel like fully secure, just so you know. I've never felt that way. But in those days, I think
is that you or is that the industry? If you were in a different industry, would you feel secure, or is that just your makeup, your nature?
That's a really good question. You're right, Bill. I mean, I haven't even thought about other people's. Of course, now I see it. I'm like, everyone's feeling vulnerable more so, right? I think you're right. I mean, it's probably an ongoing paranoia that we all have.
Yeah, I think for all entrepreneurs, we're all freaked out about that stuff.
I know, and now
if you're not, you're getting kind of lazy. If
that's
you're not
right.
Freaked out.
Either you have a monopoly, right, or you have oil underneath your feet. But generally, I think to answer your question, Aarti, like there was a moment when I couldn't hire consultants anymore. right? And I needed full timers. And so I think at that moment, the revenue that was coming in, I couldn't support it with consultants. And I think it took me a couple of years to make a full time hire. And then the second milestone was my wife, who was actually one of my clients. She started to see the business doing well enough, and we were having kids, that she quit her job. So I was like, okay, now it's real. Like now I have to provide. And then there's another milestone, which is her assistant, who was great. She wanted to leave Sony when it got bought by Westfield. And so the day she came home from that job, upset and frustrated, I had a job offer written on paper. And so that felt real to me. And not only did my wife was able to not have to go to work there, but then I could hire her assistant because she's amazing, and have a job offer written on paper that she took immediately. So that felt to me like a big moment, right, where I was starting to build the right infrastructure as well.
Yeah. So Aarti, I'm curious your reaction to this, because and my story is somewhat similar, is that after about 18 months, I left H&K or PSI, H&K, and had 6 clients, and my accountant finally came to me and said, Bill, you probably should give this thing a name. It was Bill Coletti LLC. You should probably give it a name. You probably need a website. And I said, oh yeah, it's a good idea. And that's when it kind of my first step of feeling real. So Aarti, have you heard that story from other entrepreneurs that they kind of didn't go in thinking they were going to build the thing and then kind of got reminded somewhere on first base?
I mean, that's my story as well. Yeah. Like when I left Provoke, I mean, I had a CEO that said to me, "Hey, I want a little bit of your time," and I said, "Oh, sure, I'm gonna work part time. It'll be great." Fast forward to June, and I had one point, I think it was like 16 clients, and I was like, "This is not the lifestyle that I had envisioned when I first kind of moved into this chapter." But yeah, I mean, I think the accidental entrepreneur, right? The one who, they started it maybe because they had a friend, and like Vijay, you were doing it. Someone can come to you and say, "Hey, can do a little bit of PR for me?" And suddenly that sort of snowballed into a real business. So I think that is a common story. Some people are much more intentional about it, right? Some people go into it and they say, "Hey, look, I know that I can start with this specific client. I know they will follow me if I leave this agency, and then they're going to help me keep my doors open, or open my doors, and help me make those first hires." Another question though I have for you, Vijay, is about the leadership structure. So your ownership structure, because you've mentioned a partner. I know you're CEO and you have 5 partners, including, I believe, your wife, right? So tell us a little bit how the ownership of VSC is structured.
Yeah, well, it started off with me being the primary owner, and now I've given ownership stakes to partners, and they are vesting over a period of time.
But you remain majority?
I'm the majority still, but as we go along, my partners are owning more of the company.
Younger than you typically, or same age, roughly?
Yeah, I mean, I probably should be doing more people younger than me, but yeah, some of them are younger, and others are just senior and have been around the block or have worked with me for now decades, and I trust them, and I want them to participate in this.
Is it? I mean, I'm assuming this is a retention tool, and are you all aligned on what a potential exit or a liquidation event would look like?
Yeah, I believe it is a retention tool. I don't think we've ever thought about selling it as it stands. I think we all enjoy it. And frankly, if I sold it, I'd probably just be doing it again in a couple of years.
Vijay, how old are you?
Like
how old are you?
Like many people do. I'm 47.
47. Do you think about 10 years, 57, 60? Do you think about that and what the firm looks like and your role in it at 10, 15 years out?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we do see it as shaping and shepherding in new leaders that can lead the organization, and me stepping back more into strategy or and other business units. Like we started a venture fund 2 years ago, and we raised outside capital, and I'm a general partner in that now. And so, yes, I've tried to evolve our business in a way that there's growth opportunities, and then I'm also trying to grow in some ways myself. So yeah, we've thought about it. I think the beauty of our business is we do enjoy it, and we do enjoy the fact that we don't have owners and we don't have external pressure. I mean, we have enough pressure from everything else. That
right.
The last thing I want is some other pressure, because we could say whatever we want, we could do whatever we want, we could turn down clients, we can work from anywhere. I think that freedom matters. I value the freedom.
So the motivation for some of the leaders to take equity in the agency isn't necessarily because you guys are building to sell at some point, but it's because they basically would mean that they don't have a boss, so to speak, anymore, and they can feel secure in the lifestyle that VSE provides them.
I believe so. I think there's other ways to maybe make money fast, but in this business, we're trying to make money slow. Um, and frankly, it was easier to chart all these things out 2 years ago when everything's up and to the right. And I think now the mentality is more like let's survive the next year or two, and then let's rethink what this all is, right? Because what's happening in the world of media and influence, and who controls influence. So we're hitting there's a couple different things happening. There's three things happening. One, the economy shifted. Two, how media is consumed and influence has shifted. And three, there is this feeling like AI is creeping around the corner. And what does that mean? So it's a moment where we're all kind of happy to be doing this in a community and friendship that we've established for now decades. Like my partners and I, we've all worked together for over 10 years, and many of them more than that. And so that's where we are mentally right now.
So there's a concept that we've talked about with some other owners that with what we would call kind of I call them wisdom firms, but they're kind of high strategy, low tactics. They're not selling account executive work. They're really selling C-suite advisory, CMO advisory, big strategy thinking. As you guys look at your firm and I look at your services, I see you doing some tactical stuff, but I also see you doing a lot of really big thinking stuff. With those three megatrends that you just identified, where's the future? Big ideas, high strategy, tactics.
It's a good question. So the reason why we have to do both, first of all, I love doing this. We all love doing the strategy work, and it's super valuable. And when we get our best references, it's because people feel like they were a thought partner. On the flip side, if you enjoy working with early stage companies like we do, which maybe we shouldn't, but we do, they want to see results. So as much as they love an idea, they need to see something come to fruition that you did. And so I've personally always felt that way too, that I will pay for results in the long run, and I will pay a premium for people that give me strategy and results. But I will probably not long term pay for strategy. At some point, I'll need to have things done. But I could be wrong. It's just in our world, everybody's so the budgets are so sensitive that you have to continue to demonstrate your value, because it's not just the entrepreneur that's deciding; it's their board of directors, it's the VCs that have to look at how much they spend. And so I feel like we're just the nature of the early stage market, Bill, is like you have to do the tactical at least. If you can do both together, that's a premium.
Given that it sounds like you're quite, over indexed maybe on early stage companies, do you feel like media relations is like 80 to 90% of where your revenue comes from? Or is it more distributed than that?
Yeah, I would say probably like at least 60 to 70%. There's like this growing opportunity for executive branding, or however people are calling that, where they want to go direct to audiences and they need help figuring out how to do that. That's part of our mix as well. But yeah, I think it's always been the case that people want to see like some sort of content go live externally, whether it's a journalist or someone on TikTok or whatever. They That's kind of what we like to do, actually. Um, and so we've stayed in that lane, but I do think it's not that specific. It is become more holistic. You've got to have social strategy. You have to help them with their messaging. You have to help them with crisis. How many crises have there been in a couple of years? And so it's a holistic mix. I always like to think we're just problem solvers is really what it is. And what's the problem today? And what are we going to use in this toolkit to solve it?
Right. And in that ideal world, media relations would just be one tool, right? But it wouldn't be the default solution to every problem. And you think that you've been able to do that and that your clients have been receptive to that?
Yeah, it's been, I don't know how we still do it, but we do. And it's been, 22 years now of putting wins on the board, and building trust with the media. And And that's also been something that we're proud of. Like when we first started, we were nobodies. I didn't have a brand. I didn't have connections. I never had a boss in PR that would open the doors for me. We kind of had to do it one by one. And now we're at a point when new journalists come into the market, we're some of the first people that they meet. And in some ways, we help them get into journalism to understand tech, which is fun. That's what happens when you become more senior. So I do think that still matters a lot, is how to work with the media, and also I think it's evolving now to like people that create content. So I don't know if we're going to call them creators or social media influencers, but like, I mean, it's happening, right? Like seeing that like somebody on TikTok can push an idea 10 times farther than like the Wall Street Journal one day.
Right.
And you got to figure out a way to engage.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. So I don't want to go deep into AI necessarily, but as you look down that lane and that mega trend, one of the kind of headlines of AI impact on marketing and marketing communications is that it's going to take over 95% of what people hire agencies for, that tactical level stuff. So Sam Altman said it recently, and we'll argue what his intent was, but as you look at that tactical component, the component that you really value and that your clients really value, does AI do that in 5 years? Do you see a threat there? Do you see an opportunity there? Reflect on that a little bit from your own personal self-interest.
Yeah. So my favorite quote, Bill, and I think the three of us have probably think about this a lot, and many professionals. I think that my favorite quote is, we're probably not going to get replaced by AI. We're going to get replaced by a human using AI.
Who's better? Who knows how to use it? Absolutely.
Right.
And that's where I just always feel like this. If you're going to be working with a company, let's say a science-driven company, that science is going to be so powerful that the person in charge of it, the last thing they know how to do is create content and focus on storytelling and things like that. And so whatever form that takes, is it me sitting there with them and making a video instantly and shaping it? Is it me introducing them to somebody on TikTok that can promote it? I mean, AI is not going to solve distribution. And the other thing we all have learned about marketing is you can do anything with technology, but at some point, actual humans can tell the difference between real creativity and cut and paste stuff. So, like everything on Midjourney looks the same to me is boring. I can see it. I can tell a Chat GPT email on LinkedIn now. Sure, they'll get better, but I'll get better too. So,
yeah.
marketing gets numb when it all becomes automated. I don't think anything is exciting. I've also personally, to bring up a second point, I've tried to figure out how to use AI in our business. And I honestly don't think there's a lot of human replacement right now. I think there is super empowerment. Like you can get content written faster, you can produce more, but it's, for us at least, it hasn't replaced people yet. They're all using these tools, but I think the difference between staying retained with a client and not will be the creativity and the human relations. Like media relations is still pitching a human who is getting pitched by 1,000 other people too, and probably like 50 bots. So I think the human touch will matter. Also, in-person things are going to matter more. So events, community, bringing people together, whatever you want to, that is going to be more valued, right? So I think digital content creation maybe looks more commoditized, but relationship-driven stuff will matter. Like, can you imagine, well, are lobbyists going to be gone in 5 years? Hell no. They're going to be more important. And so that's where I'm seeing it go. Like, I feel kind of not as nervous about the future, because I feel like creativity and human touch will still matter. And that's where I think media relations or influencer relations, what do you want to call it, will still matter, because you're still going to work with humans and they're going to pick people that they trust and are also human in my opinion. But that's what we're seeing, at least on our side. I'm curious what you're seeing.
You have to find. What about your team? Is your team worried? Maybe some of your junior staff, because the headline is we're all going to be replaced, whether you go deep like you did. But is your team concerned about it?
It's just, I think it frees them up to do more, right? And so, yes, you're right. Like, I would say that if you look at any organization, even law firms, you look at management consulting, whatever, like
the 30-year-olds are freaked out.
Yeah, you would think if
the 20-year-olds aren't smart enough, and the 30-year-olds are freaked out.
Yeah.
There's plenty of smart 20-year-olds. I'm gonna come in here and speak for the youth of yes. Said
I was
TikTok can push an
yeah.
idea 10 times farther than Wall Street Journal. All right, go ahead.
No. I would think that a junior person at a law firm would be nervous
Yeah.
because a lot of AI was doing what they were doing.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I need you to look at this contract and find these issues. And now the AI can do it. But what the human's going to do now is going to look at 1,000 contracts. But still, someone needs to look at the contracts,
Yeah.
and it's not the partner.
True.
So that's where I think it's going to give you more scale, but I still don't see that happening yet. And I've thought about this a lot. Trust me. Like, where could we automate? But it's things like note taking now. It's blog post writing. It's getting a quick research done. And by the way, a lot of the stuff is wrong. Like, you do anything involving needing numbers or research with Gemini or OpenAI, we have to double check it because it just spits out BS half the time. So I know that'll get better, but you still need a human in the loop, and the human's probably just going to do more.
I have another sort of perspective that I want to throw out there and get your take. It feels increasingly like there's this tension between where marketers want us to be and where humans actually want to be as well. So obviously marketers want to push us into the digital sphere. They want us to be online all the time. That's easier to target. It's easier to monetize. But you're also seeing another movement of, the dumb phone is just blowing up. I think NPR did an article on it like a couple of days ago about that. People are giving up their social media accounts. People are craving sort of more authentic sort of human connection. So, I mean, how do you think that's going to impact our industry that's become maybe overly indexed on, the social media and sort of content creation in that realm?
I mean, I love it. I would hope that happens because it would be refreshing. I think what that would mean, Aarti, is what we're talking about is like building offline community will be super valuable. Bring people together.
Yeah.
The number one thing that recovered after COVID was live music, right?
Mm-hmm.
Concerts. I mean, Taylor Swift saved our economy last summer.
Totally.
Because people want to be together. They don't want to be on their
Right.
phones only.
Yes, exactly. And so that we not to completely abandon this topic, but that also made me think of kind of doing things differently, right? And going back to your sort of experience, kind of jumping right into entrepreneurship. You didn't do the tour of duty at either a big agency or a mid-sized agency. You didn't work on the corporate side. You never really had a chance to sort of learn some of the bad habits that I think the industry is still grapples with, right? The tyranny of the timesheet is one of them. Do you feel like you've been able to build VSC differently? And do you feel like you've sort of broken some of the rules that our industry kind of plays by, or kind of written your own playbook?
I hope so. I mean, that was always our selling prop to the founders, was that I'm not a PR person. I said to them, I know you don't like PR people. I don't either. Right. And I didn't like my first PR firm, not George. I love George, but they say, well, we had to fire many PR firms. I'm like, so did I. I'm an entrepreneur like you, and I was on a startup. I know how hard it is and how much little time you have, and that's why I built it. It's always been a great sales tool for us because it's true. And frankly, I've been lucky to learn how to do PR for my clients when we fuck up. They're like, hey, why didn't you do it this way? I'm like, oh, that's how they do it. We should do it that way. Or we would Google something and say, hey, that's how they wrote the press release. That's a good idea. Let's take it. The best part of our job is you can just copy and paste shit all the time. And creativity is on the internet now. And before your new world where there's nobody using the internet, but you could see creativity and think about how to be inspired. It has changed the way we did it, Aarti, because we never did billing by the minute or the hour. I didn't even know the structure of people. Like, what's an account manager versus a coordinator?
Yeah.
I actually still don't know some of these titles. Like, I'm talking to our partner, Ann. I'm like, I don't know. What are they called? The 4 to 6 year people. What are those people called? What are the 2 to 3 year? Those are the people I need to talk to you about.
Mm-hmm.
So I never got any of that. And also, we hired people, a lot of young people out of college who were similarly had no PR experience and were amazing, right? Because they almost thought of it as consulting, not as PR firm. Like, they were just like, oh, we're doing tech consulting. The guy's got a problem or the gal's got a problem. We're solving it using this thing you do called publicity or whatever. So it's been a huge difference for us. It's also been tough to hire people from PR firms because the senior people, at least, because they have a certain way of doing things. And that didn't always jive with myself or with our founders.
Do you even try anymore? Do you even try when you see those resumes? I mean, what's your reaction?
Never. It never worked. It still doesn't work. What works is finding someone that has an innately cool skill from something else. that could apply to our world, or just training them up from ground zero, like fresh out of college. Like, let me like brainwash you into thinking about how our way is, and hopefully you'll stay. Like that actually works really well, like extremely well. Because if you start the culture from day zero, it's amazing. And then the last one is if you have a true rival firm. I'm not going to name any names, but there's a couple that I respect. And would I want their people? Hell yeah! Like they think like we think, and they're good at what they do. So there's a couple firms that you see that do it differently, and I would say whenever I see their work, I respect it. And you could see people's work now. You could see what gets attention to know. So that's how we did it. Yeah.
So, okay, well, I mean, I have to ask the flip side of this. Like, what was a moment that you said, "Oh shit! Like, I am in over my head. I really wish I need to turn to that SVP at Edelman or something
Systems
to help
and processes
me
and
solve
back
this."
office, any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
It's always to tell you the truth. And a couple of people have helped me through this. One was my wife. So she came from working at Sony and Fox. And while she didn't do PR, and she did a little bit to start her career, she had hired PR firms, the big ones. She hired all the big ones, and she knew how their senior partners operated when problems happened and crises and feedback. And I started to see the style of some of those professionals. And the other thing, Aarti, we do is sometimes you do these joint things with other PR firms. Like there's two
Right.
companies,
Yeah.
and I would be a
Mhm.
sponge, and I'd watch how the other
Yeah.
firm operates, how they dress, how do they talk. Like
Mhm.
I'm definitely more like aggressive or argumentative than some of them, and I'm like, wow, I'm so inspired. You just said yes. You just said okay, we'll take care of it. I'm like, why don't I do that more? Like, so we're still learning, I'd say, and I've basically hacked it by joining other calls on these joint announcements. But I think it's still a constant issue of how do you deal with client management? I will say one thing. Most of the issues I have are with founders that have never done work with an agency. It's not the opposite. It's not someone who's worked with 20. In fact,
Right.
those ones are like, we love you guys because you're different and it's refreshing. It's the harder part is educating these 24-year-olds or 28-year-olds or 38-year-olds who've never worked in this space. Or they started a company in one space like mobile, and now they're doing climate tech, and they need to know the new game. This has been more of the challenge. And lastly, the challenge has been, hey, what the hell happened to all the media I used to get at my last startup? I'm not getting it anymore. And it's like, well, dude, there's 3,000 layoffs in the last quarter. So the challenges are actually those kind. And I'll make two more points. I sought out some mentors. So one guy was Bill Ryan, who helped Steve Jobs relaunch Apple, and he launched Yahoo, and he's now retired. And then the second one is Greg Spector, who helped Mark Zuckerberg in the early days, and then went on to help a number of other companies like Affirm. And those two folks were super generous with their time. And every time we had like a retreat, I would invite them as like honorary guests. And I valued their insight because they had been through the traditional route.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm going to go back to team for a second. You said, hire young people with creative skill sets adjacent to, what your core competency and what you do. And then you said, and you hope they don't leave. Talk about leaving. Talk about people that leave. Talk about people that stay 3, 4, 5 years, learn your secret sauce, go someplace noble, go someplace unnoble. What's your react to that? How do you react to that as a leader, and what's your take on that?
Well, being an older leader now, it's part of life. And pre-pandemic, that was the expectation that you'd work with somebody for a certain number of years and they move on. In those days, and by the way, there was a time when people would go between PR firms. That was before my time, though. That was the 90s. After the startups and .com, the IPOs, tech IPOs started again, the Facebooks and the YouTubes, the move was always to the startup. So people want to get trained. I'd be a farm system for Google and Meta and Salesforce, and people would take my people, and I hated that, but it's just the way it should be in some ways. Then I think the people I found that are the most loyal and have been my true partners are the ones that worked at a shitty PR firm before and hated it and realize how we're different. But you can't convince a young person that we're different if it's their first job. You can immediately convince them if they go work somewhere else, and then you call them 30 days later and check in with them. So that's just the way life works, and those are my favorite. I'm like, please go. And I'll call you in 30 days or a week, and let's see how it goes. The promise of these stock options and the valuations going through the roof, and that's all gone right now. That's number one gone. Number two gone is I don't know if everybody wants to work in big tech because of how technology has evolved and how people are seeing how it's ruining more society than it's helping in some cases. And the prestige of that, I don't know if it's there. The third thing is remote work. So we're offering a better product than we did before of lifestyle balance, and I'm the most proud of that than anything else. Is that we can allow professionals to live in any city in America or maybe in the world, have a family, have a backyard, go to their kid's baseball game, go to the doctor. And we're somehow, because of Anne, my partner who has talent, who lives in Copenhagen, she's managed to figure it out. And I think the one thing I'll probably be the most proud of as it relates to culture when I retire will be that we gave people their lives back. And the way it was before, which we all know, was it's expensive in the big cities. You have to constantly worry about cost of living. You're usually commuting. You often can't get back home for your kids' activities. If you're really going to be full time, it puts a lot of pressure on women, more so than men, I think. And still a female majority industry. So the system was fucked up from the beginning. And so this is where I think we're looking at how to attract great people and what actually matters. Um, and I think that like what is out there, the grass is greener, has evolved a bit too. Now, look, if the interest rates come down, IPOs explode. It'll all go back to that part at least. Those people will all get poached from all those companies, but when's that going to happen? I don't know.
So, speaking of talent, I want to ask you something that I think we have not brought up on this podcast enough, and that's about DEI. We all remember the pledges and the commitments that the industry made in 2020. I know VSC, obviously, you all are BIPOC led and founded, and I think the stat, because I remember Vijay talking to you at that time, because you all sort of rolled out a pretty ambitious plan. I think it was to have was it 45% you wanted of people of color, and I want to check back in with that. Has that remained a priority? And as an entrepreneur, do you treat this as sort of a nice to have when times are lush? Or do you think it really is important, and did it impact your business in a positive way to have more diverse voices at the table?
Right. So we made we made promises back then, and we also did this thing called the 100K pledge, where we got together with 150 executives, and we all committed that at least $100,000 would be going towards hiring, investing, and donating to African American projects and communities and people over the next decade. And that's a small number over 10 years, and that was the idea, is that nothing should be too unattainable. And on top of that, we're tracking organizations and how they make commitments. So it is a twofold project. And then we had our own commitments internally, right? I think there were I'm just being very transparent about like what we've learned through that process. So I think statistically, we're probably around there now. We've made an effort to start a project at USC. We call it the USC VSC Fellowship, where we want to bring in first generation people of color into PR. We had our first fellow last year, Danny Rodriguez. We just hired her full time. She's amazing. And in an industry that I think is still around 80% white, we're trying to work on diversifying it. And also, frankly, the companies and customers and founders we support are more diverse than the PR industry. So we should also be a reflection not only of society, but of our customers. So that's still important to us. I think one thing that I think is an evolution now is in how we talk about our culture and how we share our backgrounds. The DEI programs that we launched internally, I think initially were helpful because there's still education on how professionals should talk to each other and how they should understand each other. And there were issues, right? Like I'll give you an example. Sometimes an African American female employee would be called the name of the other African American female employee. And if it happened enough times, we're realizing like we need to be more sensitive to these things and pronunciations. I mean, we have a lot of Indian clients. I mean, it's hard for me to pronounce. So we have to think about sensitivity in that regard, right? I think what we've also kind of evolved to is that like doing these like Instagram posts on like ethnic holidays was just getting stale to me. And I kind of tried to suggest to my team, if you're going to do that, like do something, like cut a check, like go somewhere, volunteer, like make a difference. Don't just post this stuff anymore. And so I think that's part of like just the culture evolving is like either do something or like don't do something, but don't like just talk about things. And so that's where we've gotten to. I'll tell you, like it's hard. Like if the DEI industry also, it felt like it sprung up out of nowhere. And when we were looking for leaders to come train our team, it's actually very difficult. And then when we look at the training and the capabilities of those leaders, they didn't have much training themselves. They had just started learning it themselves how to train. So it felt like when we were doing some of those sessions, like people were not seeing, like felt like stuff was being like the content was being created as it went, and because the industry was nascent. And so I think every organization is kind of thinking about this in their own way. I think the firms I respect the most are like, look, I'm going to do a program. I'm going to take on these certain companies, or I'm going to hire in a certain way, or I'm going to cut a check. And for those ones, I think that's the right way to go.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're seeing less of like people like showboating around
Right.
these topics.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it backfires to do that without any substance. So it's just an evolution. I think when you
Yeah.
all look back at this 10 years from now, we'll notice that society goes through these evolution aspects.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that does make me a little sad personally is like, I'm seeing a lot less diversity everywhere I go now.
Oh, yep.
It's like flipped.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by that is like people are not ashamed to have an all dude panel like all the time.
Yep. Yep.
People are not. It's like, I mean, maybe commercials look diverse still. They've always been, and industries kind of figured out
But
some
even
things.
that's
But
looking tokeny. Even that's looking tokeny. There's the
it's looking
random.
tokeny, and so
Yeah.
look at the sports world. You know, there was a while there were actually more women doing broadcasting for men's sports, which is cool. And I think there's still a lot of work that's happening there, but I think now it's like nobody cares if it's 100% male panel all the time. Like,
I mean, people are still noticing, and I think places like TikTok, there are like conversations that are happening that are maybe outside of the mainstream. But there's pendulums, right? It does feel like we're overcorrecting for 2017, the Me Too moment, 2020, the Black Lives Matter. So we're kind of swinging the other way, and then inevitably it's going to swing back, and it will probably go farther. Both, women's rights, you know Black Lives Matter, whatever the next iteration of that might be. So I don't know. I feel like we're just sort of in this more sort of conservative kind of retreat moment at the moment. And then of course, culture, it'll evolve. But I think Twitter was actually a place where a lot of these conversations were happening. And once that no longer became the sort of town square, people sort of, again, migrated again to their little like niche echo chambers. Like for me, I'm on TikTok and it's like, is TikTok just for feminists? I'm like, this is just like feminist TikTok. And then that's what the algorithm's feeding me. Right.
right.
But you probably you may have a very different TikTok experience than I do. It's like Taylor Swift and feminism, man. That's like it's all I think TikTok is these days.
Well, okay. And now, right. You're right. TikTok's hard to know because everybody's going to have a different thing. I do think what's easy to see is when you see a company launch and you look at their board of directors.
Yeah.
Like they used to be like, we need 30-40% women. Now they're like, get one woman. I'm just telling you what I see. And it's,
oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
the second thing I would say, you're right about the pendulum. Like if Trump wins, there's going to be a whole big push again on social equity and rights, just like we saw the first time, right? Do you remember like the hat, the pink hats and everything?
Of course. Yeah.
If they ban abortion, I mean, Jesus, like we're talking about some real, like this always happens in America, right? It pushes this way, it pushes that way. So I think that's where it's going. One more point on DEI that I think is just a fact is that the budgets for DEI were coming from companies that were flush with cash and growing at like enormous rates. And so when the interest rates went up, the interest rate in DEI went down, right? And you're looking at headcount and you're saying, okay, this person brings in a lot of revenue. This person does this. Okay, what does this person do? Oh, okay. So, and a lot of organizations probably are cutting that regard, whether they're saying it publicly. Internally, they just need to figure out, is this a retention tool still? Is it actually retaining to be good
Yeah.
at DEI? Or is it driving us revenue because we can be DEI friendly? Like there's ad agencies that sell the Nike and other things, and they have to be that way. Or is it just something that we were passionate about during this moment? And
Hmm.
that's a consideration I think that maybe is not public, but I think is
Yeah.
happening privately.
So
Yep.
what are your founders, your clients, your founders? Are they listen to this conversation the past 5 minutes or so? Are they curious and tuned in? Is it they're out making money and it's not really a thing? They're forming the boards of directors you just talked about. So where to take your client base? Are they talking about this stuff?
It depends on who the client is. So the one thing about tech companies and tech startups are, in many ways, they're beholden to their board. If they take money from a social justice forward investor, I think that they make decisions similar to that investor culturally. There's a lot more mommy daughter, like father son VC founder relations than you can imagine. It's a cultural connection often. And when I see a bad founder, I see a bad VC behind them often. And when I see a very thoughtful founder, I see a thoughtful investor behind them. And when there's conflict, it's because they're not on the same page. But so that's why I say it just depends. If and there's funds like there's female like there's funds just to back women. There's funds to back different ethnic groups. There's funds that are in climate that are very specific around reducing carbon. So I think that it depends on the founder and what they're doing and what their mission is how they work. Now, I think the tourism around DEI is probably stopped, right? People that thinking that they needed to check a box but didn't really like believe in it, they're probably not focused on it. But there's still so many founders that are very committed to this, right? And they believe in it and they're still focusing
For good
on it.
reasons, like the whole Mark Cuban argument of for economic reasons as well as
Yeah,
whatever
I mean, I
emotional.
think that's what's interesting is because one stat that was sort of often thrown around, right, is that the companies that performed the best, right, objectively, using looking at the stock market or any kind of revenue markers, were the most diverse, either had women in leadership or had the most diversity sort of represented across the organization. And and so it's interesting that we're now talking about this again as a nice to have. And I'm thinking about entrepreneurs, right, that are listening to this. Like, are you thinking about DEI as sort of a nice to have that, if we have extra money, we'll fund some programs, or as a business necessity? Like, do you want to run the risk walking into a pitch room with a team that looks nothing like those who are going to be making the hiring decisions, right? Yeah.
But the Aarti, my fear is, first of all, the answer to the question, Bill, is it just depends. I would just
Mhm.
start there. There is a lot less tourism of that regard, in any regard. There's tourism around ESG promises, right?
Mhm.
People have attracted those. There's tourism around being able to work from home. People have cut that off, right? So
Yeah.
I don't think it's just one issue. I think when the economy
Yeah.
sucks, a lot of
Mhm.
tourism goes down, right?
Right.
But I do think there's another point here, which is there's two types of DEI comments I've seen with companies. One is, are we building the right company for our end goals and for our end audience? And diversity is important for being the best at what we do. Or do we need a token XYZ? Because if we put this on our website, we're going to get criticized. That latter is still
Yeah.
very heavy. It's a very heavy, an often heard conversation. And I personally don't get to hear enough of the former. And that is it's sad to me, actually. But it's not like it doesn't happen. There's people that have to sell to a diverse group of Silicon Valley professionals with their software tools, or the VCs now are more diverse than they were. The journalists are more diverse than they were, and so and also, like, I think, you know what, we're a more multicultural country that marries interculturally a lot more than we did. So these identities are also starting to become antiquated in some places, where like a mixed marriage and family is almost becoming mainstream in this country. So these, like, saying that you're this or that is almost starting to fade in some places. And I think that's actually a bigger opportunity to have a discussion around, which is that we're becoming a interesting melting pot of a country. And at least in the coast and in areas of major economic gain and power and leadership and technology. When I go and see my friends, you drive around San Francisco, you drive around New York, you go to the top 20 cities in America, you see a pretty mixed community that is not being defined by one ethnicity or not.
Yeah.
Right.
More economic.
And interesting, this is also happening around gender too, right? With like they, them, like folks know they no longer want to be shackled to whatever baggage is associated with, being traditionally male or female. I have a friend who's a college professor, and she was confused about like they, them. And she asked some of her college students who were like male presenting or female presenting, like why they were they, them. And they said they were just tired of the baggage that came with their, gender, assigned gender. And I thought that was an interesting way to think about it, especially thinking about what you just said, Vijay, is that people don't want to be necessarily identified with just sort of one ethnic identity or one, in some cases it sounds like gender. So yes, I mean, this is the evolution that I think our industry needs to be on,
keeping an
we
eye
need
on.
to care
Gotta
about.
watch it. See what's going on there. Hey, Vijay, I want to go half a step back. You said something I love and I want to dig in on. You said one of the cultural paradigms, my words, cultural things that you're most interested in is that you gave your employees their lives back. And I love that concept. Let me channel a middle America small age or mid-size agency owner that says, yeah, man, that's cool. But what are they giving me for that paycheck? I get it that they got their lives back, and I'm trying to push in on that. And it's cool that they got their lives back, but you're an owner and you need outputs and you need to deliver results for your people. React to that perceived tension. I don't believe it is, but let's just play out the perceived tension of they got their life, but when do they get your revenue?
I'll tell you, it is, I hate to say this word, it is a win-win. Okay. Because you just work better when you're happier and you have more hours because you're not commuting. Right. So instead of the 2 hours in the car, you have 2 hours for the baseball game or take a shower or get a haircut. It actually just works out. Like it pencils out correctly. Now, there's things that I always worry, like how are we going to have a West Coast client's needs solved by this person who lives in Georgia, and Anne sorts that out. She has a team that's in different time zones, so it's not like easy to do, Bill. But I think it does work. Like, and we learned this in the pandemic for us, at least for our business, that when you hire real professionals who know what to do and don't need a lot of handholding, some, i.e., maybe not the young people, right? But the people that are middle of their career or older, they don't need to go to an office. They don't need a whiteboard. They're like coming up with ideas on Zoom, or they're native to this Zoom world, or they're 22. Now, I think that the middle of America person is happy. The young person needs to be inspired. So we have these WeWork all access passes. So, 4 women in New York get to go to Soho and work there and have that life. It's fun. Like in other, I wouldn't say San Francisco. I don't know if San Francisco is like popping like New York is, but like our young people get to go to cities. They go get an Airbnb together. They go skiing. They work from Vail or whatever. So they're having fun and moving around. And I tell them, I'm like, this isn't work from home. It's work from anywhere. So take advantage of that while you're here. Like one of our managers was in Kenya for like 3 weeks. I didn't even know, except for her phone line was a little messed up, so I had to WhatsApp her. But we're trying to make it better than being at home for some people. It's better. Like you're traveling, you're out there, you get to see the world. You don't have to wait till you retire to go to Africa or Japan. Go do it now. And then for people that are more established, have children or are married with kids, like that part of their life is so critical too. And before you know it, Aarti knows you've got kids, you blink your eye and they're going to go to college and you're going to regret it. And so I feel like I would like to be part of that story for my team where they got to spend time with their kids.
I was talking to a CEO who also teaches at one of the universities, PR communications. And he was saying that a lot of his students are really, they've been disillusioned by all of the return to office and how many agencies that initially had really doubled down on remote were now, requiring 2 to 3, sometimes more than that, days in the office. And that wasn't the lifestyle that they really envisioned for themselves for so many reasons, Vijay. And I think you touched on many of those. And so I did ask the CEO, I said, well, these are folks right out of school. Like, well, what's the plan to train them? Because his agency is fully remote. And, it was a lot of intentionality behind it. Honestly, probably more intentionality than there was around, when you threw them into a room and just hope that they learned by, osmosis. Everyone's given like a dedicated career coach. They have a meeting schedule for them. They're assigned, different calls to sort of drop in on, to sort of be sort of a silent listener to. I mean, there was a lot of thought put into how, because it's in their best interest that these folks are well trained and are continuing to learn and grow. It's not, so I thought that was really an interesting way. And also that, young people, they still want remote work. It's not like it's just folks that are middle-aged or that have young kids.
Yeah, you have to make up for it in other ways, right? Like for us, it's also retreats and gatherings. Like it feels good to see your colleagues, right? Do you want to see them 5 days a week? Probably not. But there's somewhere between 5 days a week and never that each company that is remote is figuring out.
So what do you guys
right?
do? Like once a year, you get everybody together?
Well, we were doing, so in the ZERP era, we were doing quarterly and then a trip to Hawaii.
Okay.
Then as ZERP went away, we're like starting to like think about budgeting. So we do we have a couple of regional meetups. We're probably going to plan something this year. And that's been fine. Like we need to do something. I think quarterly is probably the move for us. And I think regional meetups are fun because they're actually like low cost and people can have bonding around.
Will
where
you
they
go
live
to
and
those? You'll go to north, south, east, and west yourself, or
I
one of your
try to
leaders?
go to like some of them. Right?
Yeah,
Like
nice.
in New York, or if I'm going to New York, I'm saying, hey, let's get everyone together in New York. Or
I'm seeing
if
a
one
lot
our
of guys
partners
I'm working with are
LA.
doing exactly that.
We're doing a lot of that.
They
So
make it
I'd say
around
that there's a
them.
fair amount of, like this week, for example, we have 4 people in from East Coast for Climate Week in San Francisco. And I'm meeting some of them at this thing and some of that, but nothing like too formal. But that's the new world we see, is that you get together around things. And actually, often it's nice to get around industry things, like around our work. And if you're all working in renewable energy, that teams can meet up. Like, remember the conferences, we went into this one conference. So I think there's a middle ground between 5 days in the office and 0. But what's weird is like people that have to go to an office just to sit on a Zoom, right, with a bunch of customers
Because
that
their
aren't
boss
there.
isn't there, their
"Oh, we're
subordinates are
good."
there, nobody's there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a common complaint. I don't know how much you guys like are on Fishbowl or on Glassdoor, but I love it. I love to hear what people are saying. And this idea that like no one that they work with directly is actually in the office with them, but they're just there to meet some mandate, right? I know we have to wrap up, but I wanted to wrap up with a question, Vijay. So the reason you and I have seen each other in person, as much as we have over the last few years, is because when you all had an office, so generously donated some conference room space for us to host award shows over the years. So I'm curious how awards have sort of played into your agency's sort of overall growth. If you're a entrepreneur listening, like, do you think that that's something that they should prioritize?
It depends on the prestige of the award, I'd say. I know your award was prestigious because it was hard and I met the judges and we really batted these things around and it felt like, and I do believe that there's several in the PR industry, since I know how hard our world is, that I really respect the work. I think that's in a lot of the creative industries, it's good. I think there's some media companies now though that like look like they're only award businesses, and I'm a little skeptical of some of the awards out there. But that's just because those people have decided to lower the bar, in my opinion, right? Or like I get a million emails from them, like they have made too many awards. So this is the problem with when you create anything that involves exclusivity. If you make it less exclusive, you ruin it. Um, but I do think that there still needs to be a place for people that do great things to be recognized. And there's other ways. That if you have an app, you can have app reviews. If you have G2 for enterprise products, sure. But I think that there's still an important world for this to be recognized. And also, I think it gives companies a lot of confidence, right? We never talk about that. Like, first of all, getting article for a company, everyone inside gets happy. Winning an award, you're like, man, maybe I'm doing the right thing
For
with
your
my life.
team. That's for your team, you mean? Winning an
For our
award is
team,
for
and
your
even
team,
for our
yeah.
customers, like there's pride. We don't
They
talk
value,
enough
yeah.
about being proud of our work, right? And I love that awards exist for that, is that it makes us all like, you know what, Aarti? It's something you could take back to my Indian parents and be like, look, I know you don't know what PR is, but I got an award for it.
Award for it.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, but to your point, I mean, it's like I think we're going to see more more organizations, media organizations where news is sort of the front, right, for the actual revenue generating businesses that are kind of maybe more of the back end. We're seeing this the trades have actually figured this out, but now, like, New York Times, like, how much money do they make on Wordle, right, or their recipes, right? That's not their news product. So I think that's an interesting evolution for our industry. But yeah, I think our industry is so used to being behind the scenes. The ad folks have always had a lot of bravado and they've always celebrated themselves. So it's an interesting, and another conversation about why are we such a modest bunch? Um, well, thank you, Vijay. It's so great to have you on the show. It was so great to get your perspective. I think it's refreshing. It's something we haven't heard someone who's sort of a born entrepreneur like you are. So thank you.
Aarti, Bill, always a pleasure. Thank you. I felt like these are always like part therapy, part podcast, right? So.
Yes.
Happy to help. Happy to help.
Mhm.
Happy to help. That's awesome. Thank you again. I appreciate your generosity of time. Thank you. Great conversation with Vijay. Aarti, there are so many wonderful, wonderful things that you bring to this podcast. I think your depth and breadth of experience and your insights, but man, you bring us cool guests. So thank you so much for that. I think he was just a super fun, I don't want to say contrarian perspective. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think sometimes my favorite people in this industry are those that have had some more sort of unconventional entry points, and that are willing to sort of, break things a little bit to see, what we, to help our industry to fix it and make it better.
Yeah. And I was so, a couple of highlights that for me from this conversation that we had was this notion of he's a problem solver, and that's what he calls himself and called himself. I don't know if I don't think it shows up on the website, but I think he's a problem solver. He has clients, founders, tech startups that have problems, and it is his challenge to figure out a solution to those problems using the mediums that he's native in. And I just really thought that was refreshing, and it's probably great when that comes through in a pitch. And so I think just saying what we do as problem solvers was great. I loved hearing that.
That stood out to me as well. And I thought about it actually in the context of some amount of disdain that he expressed about PR people, right? I think at one point he said that, he'll go into a pitch and a founder will say, I don't like PR people. And Vijay will say, no, neither do I. And, here's why we're different. And it made me think about this dichotomy of like, some of us, in our industry identify as problem solvers, and some, even though they will not say it, kind of lean towards more being people pleasers, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the problem solvers get frustrated at the people pleasers because it sort of drags the whole industry down, right?
Yes.
And I think some of that people pleasing just sort of stems from this lack of confidence in the value that we provide, because oftentimes it's sort of this gut feeling, it's instinct versus having hard metrics. And I think one of the things Vijay said at the beginning of the call feeds into this, is when he realized that he didn't need external PR support because he said, quote, they were just writing emails. And I think that's the core of the insecurity that PR people feel. And I think that's this perception that what we're doing is easily, it's not a craft, it's not a skill, it's quote, just writing emails. And the art, the gift of persuasion and storytelling is kind of underplayed, of like, oh yeah, I can just send a journalist an email.
Yeah, so true. I love, that. I don't love it for the industry, but I love thinking about this low self-esteem, and I'll put a finer point on it. And I've told this story or this parable is that I think a lot of PR people, as contrasted under the big umbrella of marketing communications, as contrasted to marketers, people that identify as marketers versus people that identify as PR people, is that sometime in their college or academic journey, they said, man, all that metric stuff of marketing, that's not for me. That quantitative side of marketing is not for me. This is more for me. So poet and quant, and therefore I've got lower self-esteem. And I think it is a selection process that people go through when they sort themselves out in undergraduate classes. And of what am I going to be? Am I going to be a PR communicator, or am I going to be a marketer? They get they're self-labeled with this sense of low self-esteem. It's not accurate. It's not right, but I think it's true, that people sort of operate in that way. And I think Vijay comes to the world as He's just a guy solving problems.
Right.
He was an entrepreneur and founder himself and really thinks that this medium is the way to do it. And I think a lot of people should be refreshed to think that way. The other thing, juxtaposing what you just said and what he said, is that lead and challenge versus serve and respond. And I know we've talked a little bit about this in the past, is that kind of up and to the right are folks that are leading and challenging their clients versus those that are note-taking, serving, and respond. I think the future is in lead and challenge.
Yeah, no, I think those are
which
all
improves the self-esteem.
Yeah, exactly. And I think those are all excellent points. And, I always cringe when people say, oh, I'm not a math person. I don't like numbers. That's why I went into PR. Um, I don't think that, works and is viable in today's world. I think that hasn't been true for a long time. Right. And so,
but I still hear it.
I still hear it all the time. I was in English, and the two, I think we've created this sort of false dichotomy that you can either be good at math or you can be good with words. I think having like a proficient understanding of math that allows you to sort of read an analytics dashboard, I don't think that makes you, I don't think that's mutually exclusive with being like gifted with words. And I wish and I hope that we will stop assuming that and stop giving people a lazy out, right? For not being robust and curious and having some sort of understanding of.
And then this is business. We're talking, we are in a B2B, for the agency, B2B. We have got to move the needle.
Yeah.
Somehow, hopefully by sales, but often in other things, purpose, maybe not necessarily sales. But we're doing things for the business that investors and others care about. And we should be native, maybe not native, but we should at least be conversant in some of that stuff. Yeah. And that's a pretty close cousin to being able to read a balance sheet and be able to read and understand how business works. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And to your point about leading and challenging, I think sometimes agencies are handcuffed to who their contact is, right, within an organization. And I think that's why every agency aspires to go as high level as they can, where there is room to push back and challenge when your point of contact is, a marketing manager. That person does not really have the clout within their organization often to be challenging and pushing back. So you kind of do become order takers. And that's why every entrepreneur, every agency leader I've ever spoken to, they roll out capabilities specifically to get them into, entry points higher within the organization, maybe even outside of the comms department, right? They're like, well, this is our entry point into marketing. This is how we can have a direct, line to the CEO, whatever that might be. But yeah, I think the industry has really been limited by that.
Yeah. It's so great that the Vijay conversation sort of opened us up to just some different thinking. And I think that's personified by his take on hiring outsiders and bringing outsiders into his firm and not wanting to hire people that have been at the big box firms. And so I think that's really, it sparked this conversation in our debrief, but I love his approach and view of hiring curious, creative, smart people from outside the typical disciplines, and the value add that brings to the firm. Now, I've got a caution on that, but I think it's great. So I was curious your reaction just to the notion of, as a standard, hiring outsiders.
I think I see where your kind of red flag is coming in, because part of it is I think being an outsider is great, but I do think there are some guardrails. And I think one of the things he said was that, when he's on a call with a sort of a big box agency or that he's, collaborating with for a client, he listens very closely, right? And he tries to be a sponge and take in as much as he can. And I think that's really smart, because I do think you need some of that direction. And I will say that I think the fact that he didn't come from a traditional agency background are reasons he can say things like, yeah, I'm trying to make money slow. I'm trying to give people their life back, because he never worked in sort of the more traditional sweatshop environment at a AC or AE level. Because a lot of the agency owners who I know who have had that experience, they'll say things like, oh, today's workforce, they don't realize that we were working 12 hours. We slept at our desks. And I had one agency CEO tell me once, she was like, I don't understand. We used to cry at our desks all the time. We'd go throw up in the bathrooms because we were so stressed out. And as if like that was some sort of hazing rite of passage that's necessary, right? To entry point into our industry. And I think he can say things like, I don't understand why work and life can't coexist together. Because he wasn't trained with some of those bad habits.
It seems like he's built a beautiful firm on these outsiders. And so, I think it's great. I think, my caution, as I think you foreshadowed, and my caution is, if you're starting up a firm and you're like, well, that Vijay guy really got it right. I want to hire a bunch of outsiders. I want to hire some non-traditionalists. If you're starting your firm, I think that's cool. Be careful, because I think those people kind of need a little bit of guardrail, need a little bit of system and procedure. We still have businesses to run. I'm not advocating for timesheets by no means, but having some systems and some processes and some procedures, because if you bring in a lot of culture changer outsiders and your culture's not durable, you run the risk of the inmates running the asylum. And we got to be careful about that. And I think Vijay is pretty clear. Well, he may not have a poster of his 10 core values. I think people kind of know where he's coming from as a leader. And I think that's helpful to have that. And so I think I worry about a younger leader hiring outsiders. If they're not sturdy in their own footing, that could be dangerous.
Yeah. And I would be
confusing.
I mean, I would be so curious to hear more about some messy situations that I'm sure he got into, right? Yeah. As someone who's an outsider himself. And it sounds like he sort of surrounds himself with well-seasoned professionals that he can sort of tap into when he finds himself in a situation like that. But I think, Bill, I think you've been such an advocate on this podcast for systems and processes and really demystifying that, right? Like I think you've said numerous times, right? Like it can start as simple as write everything down, right? Just so that you have some sort of reference point that you can go back to. Because I think to some creatives or some folks that want to go into this, right? I think systems and processes are exactly why I started my own agency. I didn't want to get bogged down in all that red tape.
Yeah, it's great. It's a misnomer. It's bad behavior. We all benefit from systems at some level. And I think the constraint enables creativity. Is the irony is yes. We don't get shackled. There's a biblical context of to and from. We don't have to. If we are shackled, we actually can live a freer life.
Bill, this actually has come up in a lot of pop culture discourse recently, as we've tying this back to my heartbeats. We've seen these album drops, right, that are 2+ hours, and there's a lot of critics that are coming out and saying, "Hey, music industry, there is liberation in constraint."
Absolutely, it's true,
right? Instead of having artists drop these 2-hour albums on us, and we as the listener have to muddle through and find the gems. Like, I mean, if you put some limitations on these artists, they will probably find their best work, and they will be able to sort of sharpen and hone their craft a little bit more than right now, where they're just given this messy, like, you're the biggest star in the world. Yeah, of course you can put out 3 hours of songs because everybody will listen to it. And I'm not picking Swifties. I'm not picking on Taylor Swift. There's been other examples. Beyonce's album's quite long.
Movies are doing the same thing.
Oppenheimer, right?
Yeah, it could have been a lot shorter.
So one more thing I'll say on Vijay's, the firm that he's building, and kind of giving people their life back. I just saw an article in the Harvard Business Review, and the headline was, "Highly skilled professionals want your work, but not your job." And it's this idea that sort of freelancers are sort of in more demand than ever, and a lot of really skilled professionals are moving in that direction because they want more control over their time. And I think return to office has been a big part of that. People got a taste for what life could be like if they sort of owned their time a little bit more. So I think he's really onto something. I think there's a lot of demand in the workforce for what he's doing.
Yeah, great conversation. Hope everybody enjoyed it as much as we did. Thanks everybody for joining us on the Heart and Science of Creative Leadership. Aarti, as always, thank you for bringing us great guests.